Okay, I want to start by putting a very specific image in your head. I want you to picture the Student Center at University College, London.
Okay.
It's, a modern building, lots of glass, students rushing around with coffee, stressed about exams.
Hmm.
And right there, in the middle of all this bustle, inside a big glass display case, sits an old man.
And we should be clear, we don't mean a statue or a painting.
No, not at all. We mean the man himself. He's sitting on a wooden chair holding this walking stick, and he's wearing an 18th century coat and breeches.
His actual clothes.
His actual clothes.
Oh.
And if you look closely at his hands, you realize, wait, those are bone. That is a literal skeleton padded out with hay, dressed in his own clothes.
It is Jeremy Bentham, the auto icon.
It has to be the most bizarre memorial in all of academia. I mean, most people get a plaque, maybe a building named after them. This guy decided to become a piece of furniture.
He did.
But looking at photos of this thing, the auto icon, it creates this immediate tension. On one hand, it looks kind of like a wax museum figure that's seen better days,
A little creepy, yeah.
But then on the other hand, you find out the history and the fact that his actual skeleton is in there. It moves from quirky to genuinely macabre really, really fast.
It does, but that tension is perfect. It's the perfect entry point for understanding the man himself.
How so?
Well, Jeremy Bentham is remembered today mostly for this eccentric afterlife, or, maybe as a footnote in a philosophy class. But the mind that orchestrated that display, the mind that said, stuff me with hay and put me in a box, was one of the most rigorous, radical, and frankly disturbing intellects of the last 300 years.
We're talking about the father of utilitarianism.
We are. But we're also talking about a man who wanted to reduce all of human morality to a mathematical equation.
A literal algorithm.
A literal algorithm. He was a man who designed a prison system that inspired modern surveillance states. And yet, at the exact same time, he was the man arguing for the decriminalization of homosexuality and equal rights for women, when most of his contemporaries were still, trading slaves or burning witches.
See, that's the part that always trips me up. You have this guy who sounds like a cold, calculating machine, literally wanting to govern by spreadsheet, but he somehow ends up landing on these incredibly progressive, humane positions.
That is the riddle we have to unpack in this deep dive. Was he, as he truly believed, a genius who unlocked the secret code of human happiness? Or was he, as Karl Marx so famously described him, a genius of bourgeois stupidity?
Marx really didn't pull any punches with him, did he?
Marx absolutely loathed him. He thought Bentham's view of humanity was so narrow, so shopkeeper-like, that it was just insulting to the species.
Wow.
But to understand why Marx was so angry and, why Bentham is sitting in that glass box right now, we have to go back. We have to look at where this obsession with utility and measurement came from. And it all starts with a very lonely, very brilliant child in London back in 1748.
I was reading about his early life, and lonely feels like a huge understatement. We hear the term child prodigy a lot, Mozart and people like that. But Bentham feels different. It wasn't just that he was smart. It's that he seemed to bypass childhood entirely.
He really did. He was born into a wealthy family. His father, Jeremiah Bentham, was a clerk to the Worshipful Company of Scriveners, which is, basically a high-powered legal administrator.
Right.
And Jeremiah didn't just want a smart son. He wanted a trophy. He wanted a genius he could show off.
And he got one. There's this famous story that they found Jeremy, as a toddler, literally still in skirts, because that's how they dressed. Little boys, then poached at a desk reading a multi-volume History of England.
Rapin's History of England. It's a dense, dry, academic text. And he wasn't just looking at the pictures, he was actually reading it.
At what age?
Maybe 2 or 3. He started learning Latin at age 3. By age 7, while other kids were playing with hoops and sticks in the street, little Jeremy was performing Handel's sonatas on the violin for his father's dinner guests.
That sounds absolutely miserable. It just sounds like he was a performing monkey for his dad.
It's not too far off, honestly. His father was incredibly pushy. He saw this incredible intellect in his son and immediately mapped out a trajectory for him. Oxford, law school, and then eventually Lord Chancellor of England. That was the goal.
And he didn't waste any time. He sent Jeremy to Queen's College, Oxford, at age 12? 12. I mean, just stop and think about 12-year-olds today. They're awkward, they're playing video games. Imagine dropping a 12-year-old into a university full of drinking, gambling, 18-year-old aristocrats in the 1760s.
It was complete disaster for him socially.
Hmm.
He was small, he was physically weak, and he was intellectually superior to everyone around him, including his tutors, which did not make him popular.
I can't imagine it would.
He developed this profound, lifelong sense of isolation. He looked at the world around him, all the rituals, the hazing, the religious oaths he was forced to swear to get in, and he didn't see tradition. He just saw nonsense. Illogical, inefficient nonsense.
And this seems to be the seed of his entire personality, right? He's the ultimate outsider looking in, seeing these complex systems that everyone else accepts as normal, and just going, this is stupid. Why on earth are we doing it this way?
Exactly. That question, why are we doing it this way, drove his entire life.
Yeah.
So he graduates at 15, gets his master's at 18, and then, following his father's grand plan, he goes off to train as a lawyer. He's called to the bar in 1769.
So he's 21 years old, he's brilliant, he has all the right connections, he is perfectly poised to become incredibly rich and powerful.
The world is his oyster.
And then he just doesn't do it.
He just stops. He attends the courts, he watches the judges, he reads the case books, and he is utterly horrified by what he finds.
What was it about the law that broke him? Because you'd think a guy who loves books and logic and systems would absolutely thrive in law.
You would think that, but you have to understand the state of English law in the 18th century. It wasn't a logical system at all. It was what we call common law.
Which means it's based on precedent, right? On the decisions of previous judges.
Yes, but imagine that principle stretched out over centuries. You have thousands upon thousands of cases, often contradictory, all written in obscure legal jargon, hidden away in expensive books that only wealthy lawyers owned.
So there was no single rule book you could go buy at the store.
Not at all. If you, as a regular person, wanted to know if you were breaking the law, you had to hire a lawyer to basically guess what the law was based on what some judge said in 1650.
So it's a total pay-to-play system. If you can't afford the lawyer, you have no idea what the rules of the game are.
Bentham had a name for it. He called it the Demon of Chicane.
The Demon of Chicane. It sounds like a character from a fantasy novel.
It does, but he meant it as a profound moral evil. He genuinely saw it as a conspiracy. He believed that judges and lawyers intentionally kept the law messy and obscure so they could charge exorbitant fees to navigate it.
It was a self-perpetuating business model.
Exactly. He called it judge-made law, and he had this brilliant cutting analogy for it. He compared it to the way a man trains a dog.
Okay, how so?
He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, you wait for the dog to do something you don't like, and then you beat him. That is the way you make laws for your dog, and that is the way the judges make law for you and me.
Wow.
You don't know the rule until after you're already being punished for breaking it.
That is a devastating critique. And honestly, it still feels a little relevant today when you look at, modern tax codes or those ridiculously long terms of service agreements nobody reads.
It really is. So Bentham makes this radical decision. He decides he isn't going to practice law. He is going to fix it. He becomes obsessed with this idea of codification. In fact, he actually invented the verb to codify.
He wants to delete the whole broken system and write a new, clean operating system from scratch.
A single, clear book of laws, written in plain English, one that any citizen could read, understand, and follow without paying a lawyer. He spent the next 60 years of his life trying to sell this idea to anyone who would listen. Anyone. He wrote to the kings of Europe. He wrote to the revolutionary governors in Latin America. He even wrote a very long letter to President James Madison in the United States.
So he just writes to the president and says, Dear President Madison, I hear you have a new country. Your laws are probably a mess. Let me write them for you.
That's pretty much the gist of it.
Yeah.
He told Madison that the American common law system was fundamentally unconstitutional because the laws weren't written down by the legislators the people elected.
What did Madison say?
Madison politely declined, essentially saying, thanks, but no thanks, we're good.
It's the sheer arrogance that gets me, but also underneath it, this incredible optimism. He really believed that if you could just write the rules down clearly enough, you could solve most of human conflict.
That's the key. Bentham was an Enlightenment thinker on steroids. He believed that pure, dispassionate reason could solve absolutely everything. But this brings us to a really important clash of ideas. Because while Bentham was trying to fix laws with logic, the Americans and the French were having revolutions based on rights.
Right, 1776, the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident.
And Bentham read that and thought it was the stupidest thing he'd ever heard.
He hated the Declaration of Independence, the foundational document of modern democracy.
He despised it viciously. In 1776, he actually collaborated on an anonymous rebuttal called A Short Review of the Declaration. He looked at that famous phrase, inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and he thought it was complete intellectual garbage.
Wait, hold on a second. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, that's the brand. How can you be a social reformer and hate that?
Because Bentham was, at his core, a lawyer and a logician. He asked a very simple question. Where do these rights come from? The American said, from the Creator or from nature. And Bentham's response was essentially, show me.
He's asking for the receipt. Where's the proof?
Exactly. He argued that there are no rights in nature. In a state of nature, the strong eat the weak. That's it. A right, he argued, is a child of law. You only have a right to free speech if there is a law that says you have free speech and a police force to protect you if someone tries to shut you up.
So to him, saying I have a natural right to be free is like saying I have a natural right to own a unicorn. It's just imagination, a pretty fantasy.
He had a much more cutting phrase for it. He famously called it nonsense upon stilts.
Nonsense upon stilts.
He thought it was dangerous rhetoric. Because if everyone can just claim God gave me the right to do X, then you have anarchy. You have terrorists and revolutionaries claiming natural rights to justify anything they want.
I can see his point, but it feels incredibly dangerous in the other direction, doesn't it? If rights are only what the law says they are, then if the government passes a law saying slavery is legal, then the slave has no rights, period. Bentham seems to be saying there's no higher moral ground to appeal to.
That is the exact critique. And it's a powerful one. If you remove the idea of natural rights, do you remove our ability to stand up and say, this law is fundamentally wrong?
Yeah.
Bentham would say no. He would say, you can say the law is wrong, but not because it violates some spooky concept of nature. You say it's wrong because it violates utility.
And here we go. The big one, utilitarianism.
This is the engine that drives his entire life's work. If we can't look to God or nature or tradition for our morality, where do we look? Bentham says, look at your own body, look at your nervous system.
And this is where he says, nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters.
Pain and pleasure.
It sounds so simple, maybe even too simple. We like things that feel good, we hate things that feel bad.
It is breathtakingly simple, but the implications are massive. Bentham is saying that every single thing we do, whether we're writing a symphony, robbing a bank, or praying to God, we are doing it to either get pleasure or to avoid pain.
He calls this psychological egoism, right?
Yeah.
The idea that we are all, at our core, selfish.
We are all selfish, pleasure-seeking, pain-avoiding machines. That's the human animal, according to Bentham.
Okay, but what about something like charity? If I give money to a homeless person, that seems selfless.
Bentham would have an answer for that. He'd say, you do it because the act of giving makes you feel good, that warm glow of altruism, or, perhaps more likely, because the guilt of walking past and not giving would be a source of pain for you. So you're still serving yourself.
Okay, so if we're all just chasing our own dopamine hits, how do you possibly build a society? Because my pleasure might be, stealing your wallet.
Precisely. And that's why you need government. The whole role of the legislator, for Bentham, is to create a system of rewards and punishments laws that cleverly align my pursuit of happiness with your pursuit of happiness.
To channel our selfishness into something productive.
Exactly. And the ultimate goal of that entire system is what he called the fundamental axiom, the greatest happiness of the greatest number.
It's a giant maximization problem. You're trying to get the highest possible score for collective happiness.
It is. But Bentham, being the obsessive that he was, didn't just leave it as a vague philosophical principle. He wanted to make it a science. He created the Felicific Calculus, the happiness algorithm.
This is where I really start to struggle with him. How do you quantify a feeling? I can measure a table in inches. I can't measure joy in... What are the units, joy units?
Well, he actually tried to break it down. He gave us 7 dimensions, 7 variables, to measure the total value of any action. And we're going to really get this. We should probably walk through them.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's imagine a simple scenario. Let's say the government is deciding whether to pass a law banning loud parties after 11 p.m.
A classic noise ordinance. I like it.
Right. So on one side, you have the party thrower who gets pleasure. On the other, you have the neighbors who experience pain. We have to do the math. The first variable is intensity. How strong is the pleasure of the party versus the pain of the neighbors trying to sleep?
Okay, well, the party's really fun, a good time with friends. Let's call that a +8 on a scale of 10. But being woken up by loud music when you have to work tomorrow is infuriating, so maybe that's an adenine for the pain.
Okay. Second is duration. How long does the pleasure or pain last?
The party is maybe 4 hours, but the sleep loss, the grogginess, that affects the neighbors all the next day, so the pain lasts longer.
Good. Third is certainty. If I throw the party, how certain am I that I'll have fun? How certain is it that the neighbors will be disturbed?
Pretty certain on both counts, I'd say. High probability.
Fourth is propinquity, a great old word. It just means proximity in time. Is the pleasure or pain happening now or later? We instinctively value immediate gratification much more.
The party is now, the hangover is tomorrow, the pleasure is immediate, the pain for the neighbors is also immediate.
Fifth is fecundity or productiveness. Will this pleasure lead to more pleasure down the road? Or will this pain lead to more pain?
I guess you could argue a good party strengthens friendships, which leads to future happiness. But the neighbor's sleep loss leads to a bad day at work, which is more pain. It seems like a wash.
Okay. Sixth is purity. Is the pleasure purely pleasure, or is it mixed with some pain? For the partygoer, there's always the risk of getting a noise complaint, maybe even a fine. So the pleasure isn't pure.
Right.
And finally, the most important one for politics, extent. How many people does it affect?
And there's the clincher, isn't it? You have one household, maybe 5 or 10 people having a great time, but you might have 20, 30, 40 neighbors in the surrounding apartments trying to sleep.
Exactly. So even if the party people are having a +100 total intensity experience, if you have 30 neighbors each suffering a -10 pain, the math says the total pain is -300. The net result is negative. Therefore, the law should ban the party.
The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Spock was a true utilitarian.
But this gets really scary really fast when you raise the stakes. You used a noise complaint, which is trivial. But what if we talk about, I don't know, sacrificing one innocent person to stop a massive riot that would kill 100 people?
This is the classic trolley problem or the Christian to the lions objection that always gets thrown at utilitarianists.
Explain that one.
Okay, imagine the Roman Colosseum. You have 50,000 spectators,
Yep.
and they all get a huge thrill, let's say plus 10 pleasure units each, from watching one Christian get eaten by a lion.
Okay.
And the Christian obviously suffers an extreme amount of pain. Let's call it, I think it's 1,000 units.
Right.
Well, 50,000 spectator times 10 pleasure units is 500,000 units of pleasure. That is way, way bigger than the media's 1,000 units of pain. So does utilitarianism say, feed him to the lions?
The raw math seems to say yes, and that's morally repulsive.
It is. And Bentham was aware of this potential problem. He tried to patch it with the overarching concept of security.
What did he mean by that?
He argued that if we live in a society where the government can just grab an innocent person and throw them to the lions for public entertainment, then everyone lives in constant fear. That background anxiety, the insecurity, the uncertainty is a massive negative value that affects the extent calculation for the entire population.
So the fear of the 50,000 spectators that they could be next outweighs their pleasure from watching the show.
Precisely. So the math, when you zoom out, actually says no lions, because personal security is a fundamental prerequisite for any lasting happiness.
That feels like a little bit of a cop-out. It feels like he's twisting the math to get the moral answer he already knows is right.
It's a common criticism. But to Bentham, the alternative was so much worse. He thought relying on fuzzy concepts like justice or natural rights, without actually looking at the real-world consequences, was just emotional superstition. He wanted to look at the hard data of human pain and pleasure.
And this obsession with hard data and security and controlling behavior leads us directly to his most infamous and, I think, most misunderstood invention.
It does. Because if your goal is to maximize happiness, you have to minimize bad behavior. And to minimize bad behavior, you need to watch people.
Welcome to the Panopticon.
The all-seeing eye.
I feel like everyone kind of knows the word, or they know the Foucault version of it from college. But what was the actual plan? Because he didn't just write about it as a thought experiment. He genuinely tried to build this thing.
He spent 16 years of his life and most of his personal fortune trying to get it built. It was his great obsession. The idea actually came from his brother, Samuel, who was an engineer working in Russia for Catherine the Great.
What was Samuel doing?
He was managing a factory with a lot of unskilled, unruly workers. And he had this clever architectural idea. If you put the supervisor's office in the middle of a circular workshop, a single supervisor could watch more workers with less effort. Jeremy visited, saw this design and had a massive light bulb moment. He thought, this isn't just for factories. This is the solution to everything. Prisons, schools, hospitals, workhouses.
So paint the picture for us. What does a Panopticon prison actually look like?
Okay, picture a hollow cylinder, like a giant donut-shaped building. The prisoners live in individual cells that are arranged around the outer ring.
Okay.
The cells have bars on the front, facing the center, and a large window on the back, facing the outside. This means they are constantly backlit. The prisoners are always visible as silhouettes.
Like butterflies pinned in a display case. You can see their every move.
Exactly. And in the center of that donut hole where the supervisor's office was in the factory, you have the inspection tower. And this is the genius part. The tower has special blinds or louvers and a clever lighting system so that the inspector inside can look out and see all the prisoners, but the prisoners cannot look in. They just see a dark, ominous tower.
That's the core mechanic. It's the asymmetry of the gaze.
Yes. Bentham called it creating the sentiment of an invisible omniscience. The prisoner never, ever knows for sure if he's being watched at that exact moment. The guard might be staring right at him. The guard might be in the bathroom. The guard might have gone home hours ago. But the prisoner has no choice but to assume at every single second of every single day that he is under surveillance.
It's pure psychological warfare. You force the prisoner to internalize the guard. You start policing yourself because you're terrified of that invisible, all-seeing eye.
And that makes it incredibly efficient. You don't need 50 guards patrolling the halls. You need one guy in a tower. Or maybe you don't even need one guy. A cardboard cutout might do the trick if the bluff is good enough.
It sounds absolutely horrifying. It sounds like the blueprint for a totalitarian state.
It does to us, looking back.
Yeah.
But here is the crucial nuance that people often miss when they talk about the Panopticon. In Bentham's mind, this was the humane option.
Humane. How? In what possible world is invisible omniscience a humane form of punishment?
You have to compare it to the reality of 18th century prisons. They were not nice places. They were dark, filthy, disease-ridden dungeons. Prisoners were literally chained to walls in the dark. They died of typhus and starvation. They were brutally abused by guards with no oversight.
So context matters. This was an alternative to that.
A radical alternative. Bentham's Panopticon was designed to be bright, heated, and have fresh air circulating. He wanted to get rid of the physical chains and the beatings. He argued that if you can use the mind to control the prisoner, the power of the gaze, you don't need the chains. He called it a mill for grinding rogues honest.
He genuinely thought he could reform people with architecture.
He did. He was so convinced that he even wanted to run it as a private business. He proposed a system of contract management.
What did that entail?
He, Jeremy Bentham, would be the owner and operator. He would pay for the food and health care of the prisoners, and in exchange, he would get to profit from their labor. He designed treadmills they would walk on to power looms and other machinery.
So private prisons, profiting from inmate labor. This sounds incredibly modern and controversial.
It does. But, and get this, he proposed that his contract would include a clause where he would pay a hefty fine to the government for every single prisoner that died under his care.
Like a life insurance policy on his own inmates?
Basically, it's pure utilitarian logic. He wanted to align his selfish interest, making a profit, with the prisoner's primary interest, staying alive. If he starved them or let them get sick, he would lose money. So theoretically, it incentivized him to treat them well.
It's the ultimate capitalist solution to criminal justice. I'll bet you I can keep these guys alive and productive for a profit.
And the British government actually bought it. They signed a contract with him. They paid him money. He bought a plot of land for it at a place called Millbank, right on the Thames.
But it never got built. What happened?
It all fell apart. The land he bought was marshy and unhealthy. The king, George III, personally hated the idea. The aristocratic landowners in the area thought Bentham was a dangerous radical and lobbied against it. After years of fighting, the project was officially scrapped.
And Bentham was crushed.
He was heartbroken. He felt the government had betrayed him. He wrote that, "They have murdered my best days." He eventually got £23,000 in compensation, which was a huge sum, but he remained bitter about it for the rest of his life.
He never got over it.
Never. But of course, the idea didn't die. The French philosopher Michel Foucault picked it up in the 1970s and made it famous again. Foucault argued that while we didn't build the specific building, we built the panoptic society. Schools, hospitals, factories, even open-plan offices, they're all forms of panopticons. We behave because we think we're being watched by the teacher, the doctor, the boss.
And now, of course, we carry the Panopticon in our pockets. But let's hold that thought for the end, because that's a big one. I want to pivot. Because so far, Bentham sounds like a bit of a monster. He wants to delete human rights, he wants to calculate morality with an algorithm, and he wants to put us all in a glass donut to be watched.
Right. That's a fair summary of the dark side.
But then you keep reading his work, and suddenly this exact same cold, calculating logic leads him to conclusions that are so progressively radical, so compassionate, that they make the founding fathers look like medieval dinosaurs.
It's the other side of the same coin. And the connecting thread, the thing that unifies both the prison and the progressive politics, is sensation.
Explain what you mean by that.
Remember, Bentham's entire moral system doesn't care about tradition or what the Bible says or the natural order of things. He cares about one question and one question only. Does it hurt?
Pain and pleasure, it always comes back to that.
It always comes back to that. So he applies this to animals. Now, in the 18th century, the dominant philosophical view from people like Descartes was that animals were basically clockwork machines. They were automata. They might scream if you kick them, but it was just a mechanical reaction like a spring uncoiling. They didn't have souls, so they couldn't truly feel pain.
So you could do whatever you wanted to a dog, and it had no moral weight whatsoever.
None. Bentham looks at this and applies his calculus.
Right.
And he writes this incredibly famous line. He says, the question is not, can they reason,
Yeah.
nor can they talk, but can they suffer?
That shift from can they think to can they feel, that changes everything.
It completely shatters what he called the insuperable line between man and beast. If a horse feels pain, and pain is the definition of evil, then causing a horse to feel pain is a morally wrong act. Period. Full stop.
And he didn't mince words about it.
Not at all. He explicitly compared the treatment of animals to the institution of slavery. He predicted that one day we would recognize that the number of legs an animal has, or the velocity of the skin, is not a sufficient reason to abandon a sensitive being to a tormentor.
He was writing this in the 1780s. That's just mind-blowing.
It is. He essentially invented the entire philosophical basis for the modern animal rights movement almost 200 years before it became a mainstream idea.
But did he live it? I mean, was he a vegan?
No. And this is where the logic gets, well, it gets very utilitarian. He ate meat.
Isn't that a huge contradiction?
Not to him. He argued that animals, unlike humans, live mostly in the present. They don't have complex plans or anxieties about the future. So if you kill a cow painlessly and instantly, the cow doesn't lose its future plans for retirement. It just ceases to be.
Okay.
And if we then eat the cow, we humans get a great deal of pleasure and nutrition. So cow feels no pain in death, plus human gets pleasure from food. Net good for the universe.
That is an incredibly convenient piece of logic.
It is. But he was absolutely adamant that the life of the animal before its painless death should be free from suffering. He was okay with killing, but he was vehemently against cruelty.
And he applied the same sensation logic to something that was even more taboo for his time, sex.
This is perhaps the bravest and most hidden part of his intellectual life. In 18th century England, sodomy was a capital offense. It was a hanging offense. It was viewed with a level of religious and social revulsion that is hard for us to even comprehend today.
And Bentham writes an essay about it.
He wrote thousands of pages on it, actually, most famously an essay he titled Pederasty, which he wrote around 1785. But he didn't dare publish it. He knew it would ruin him. It would destroy his reputation completely.
But in those private notes, he crunches the numbers.
He applies the Felicific Calculus. He looks at two men engaging in a consensual sexual act.
Yeah.
Variable 1. Pleasure, well, they are both enjoying it. That's a clear positive value on the ledger.
Okay.
Variable 2. Pain. Who is being hurt?
No one. It's consensual.
Exactly. He called it an imaginary offense. He argued that it creates no primary mischief. No one is robbed, no one is assaulted, no property is damaged. The only pain that exists is the abstract offense taken by other people in society because of their own prejudice and superstition.
So he's balancing the actual real pleasure of the couple against the imaginary prejudiced pain of the pearl clutchers.
And he concludes, quite logically, that the state has absolutely no business regulating it. He called homosexual acts mere irregularities of the venereal appetite, basically just a different taste, like preferring tea over coffee. It had no moral significance.
He pathologized the reaction to the act, not the act itself. He basically said, if you have a problem with this, that's your problem, not the laws.
For 1785, that is astoundingly modern. It's the first known argument for homosexual law reform in English history. And it's the exact same logic he used for women's rights. He argued for complete female equality, suffrage, the right to divorce, the right to hold political office. Why? because women feel pain and pleasure just as intensely as men do. Excluding half the population from public life massively reduces the total happiness of the society.
It's just amazing how the same intellectual tool, this cold, robotic principle of utility, can be used to build a terrifying prison and to liberate the oppressed.
It's a tool. It's an amplifier. It just amplifies whatever input you give it. If you input security above all else, it builds a panopticon. If you input the alleviation of suffering is the only thing that matters, it builds a framework for human rights.
We've talked a lot about the philosophy, but we have to talk about the man himself, because you don't write thousands upon thousands of pages about the demon of chicane and auto icons without being a little different.
Different is definitely the word. Bentham was a supreme eccentric, a true English original. As he got older, he became more and more of a recluse in his house in Westminster, which he nicknamed the Hermitage.
He had names for everything, didn't he?
Everything. He had a favorite walking stick he called Dapple, he had a teapot he called Dick, and, most famously, he had a cat.
The famous cat.
Originally, the cat was named simply Langbourne, but then Bentham decided the cat should be knighted, so he became Sir John Langbourne. Eventually, Bentham concluded that the cat had taken holy orders, so his final name was the Reverend Sir John Langbourne.
I love that. It shows a real sense of humor, or at least a sense of private playfulness.
Well, it does. But there was also a profound rigidness to his life. He had a strict daily routine. He woke up at 6 a.m. every single day. He would go out into his garden and trot, not walk, he called it trotting for exercise. Then he would work until 4 p.m.
And he was constantly inventing words.
Constantly. He invented his own vocabulary for his philosophy. We still use many of his words today. Words like maximize, minimize, codify, and international. He invented the word international.
Wait, international's a Bentham word. I had no idea.
It is. Before him, people talked about the law of nations. He coined international. But he also coined words that, thankfully, didn't stick, like cat whip starve 'em, which was his proposed term for a bad government.
Some modern psychologists and researchers have looked at all this. The obsessive focus on systems, the social isolation, the rigid routines, the lists and word making, and have suggested he might have been on the autism spectrum, maybe what we would now call Asperger's syndrome.
It's a retrospective diagnosis, which is always tricky and speculative, but the pattern of behavior certainly fits. The intense focus on systems, the apparent difficulty with emotional nuance, the fact that he fell in love a few times but could never quite make it work. He proposed to a woman when he was 57, and she rejected him gently, noting his many peculiarities.
It makes the whole auto-icon thing make a lot more sense, doesn't it? He didn't process death emotionally as a tragedy. He processed it logically as a problem of waste.
Exactly. To him, burying a body in the ground was just wasteful. It was rotting, useful material that could be put to better use. He wrote this incredible tract called Auto-Icon, or Further Uses of the Dead to the Living.
Further uses, as if we'd already figured out the first few uses.
Right, and he suggested that our dead ancestors could be preserved and used as memorial statues. He said, imagine a country estate where the driveway is lined not with elm trees, but with your grandfather, your great-grandfather, your great-great-grandfather, and so on.
That is the stuff of absolute nightmares.
He argued it would be a great moral lesson for the children. You can see the actual presence of your ancestors inspiring you to virtue. So he decided to lead by example. He left very strict, very detailed instructions in his will.
Step 1. Public dissection.
Public dissection, yes. This was really important to him because at the time, dissection was seen as a punishment. It was only performed on the bodies of executed criminals. It was a mark of shame. Bentham wanted to destigmatize it to help advance medical science. So on June 9, 1832, 3 days after he died, his friend, Dr. Southwood Smith, performed the dissection in front of a crowd of students and colleagues.
And there was a thunderstorm during it, right? The story is always told with a thunderstorm.
A massive electrical storm over London. The lightning was supposedly flashing through the windows while the doctor cut into the great philosopher's body. It's all very gothic and dramatic.
And then step 2, the stuffing and mounting.
The skeleton was meticulously cleaned and wired together. He was dressed in his own underwear, 2 pairs of socks, his breeches, and his favorite coat. But then they got to the head.
This is the part I was waiting for. Because the head in the glass case today is made of wax. What happened to the real one?
Bentham wanted his real head to be used. He instructed Dr. Smith to preserve it using a special desiccation technique he'd read about from the Maori people in New Zealand. It basically involved using an air pump and sulfuric acid to slowly dry it out.
DIY mummification in his garden shed?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And theoretically, it's supposed to preserve the features. In practice, it went horribly wrong. I mean, it worked in the sense that the head didn't rot, but the skin turned a dark, leathery brown. It shrank tight against the skull. The eyes were gone, so they had to put in glass eyes.
So instead of a dignified philosopher, he looked like a bog body.
It was, to quote the official reports, distastefully macabre. It was genuinely terrifying to look at. Southwood Smith took one look at this shrunken head and said, I can't possibly put this on top of the body, it'll scare people away. So they commissioned a much more pleasant-looking wax head from a French artist.
But they kept the real head, right? They didn't just throw it out.
Oh, they kept it. For decades, the real mummified head sat on the floor of the display case, right between Bentham's feet, just sitting there.
That is just asking for it to be stolen by students.
And trouble it found. Students from King's College London, which is UCL's great rival, stole it in 1975. They held it for ransom. They demanded a £100 donation to a charity. The university eventually paid up. There are all these legends about it being found in a luggage locker at a train station in Scotland.
And what about now? Where is the real head today?
Today, the real head is locked away in a secure, climate-controlled vault at the UCL Institute of Archaeology. It's considered too fragile and probably too sensitive to be on public display anymore. But the body, the skeleton in the clothes with the wax head, is still there, sitting in the new student center.
And what about that persistent myth, the one that says he attends the college council meetings?
Ah, yes. Present but not voting.
Is any part of that true?
I hate to be the one to kill the magic, but it's mostly no. He does not regularly attend the meetings. The minutes do not list him as a member. However, the legend isn't entirely baseless. The Otto icon was wheeled in to attend one meeting in 2013 as a special tribute for a retiring provost. But he is not a regular board member.
Still, the fact that we are sitting here talking about him almost 200 years later and that I can literally go visit him tomorrow means his utility calculation about his body worked. He achieved a strange kind of immortality.
He absolutely did.
Yeah.
He is arguably the most famously visible philosopher in the entire world.
So let's bring this all home. We've covered the genius, the surveillance state, the radical progressive ideas, and the skeleton in the box. When we look at the world around us in 2026, how much of it is Bentham's world?
An incredible amount of it. Almost all of it in some ways. If you look at how modern governments make policy, they are fundamentally utilitarian engines. We use cost-benefit analysis for everything. Should we build a new highway? Well, let's calculate the economic pleasure of faster travel versus the pain and cost of the homeowners we have to displace.
That's pure Bentham right there.
The welfare state. The very idea that the government has a responsibility to ensure the basic health and happiness of the poor. That's Bentham's greatest good principle in actions. The fact that homosexuality is legal in most of the West, that's Bentham's logic winning out. The fact that you can go online and read the laws of your country for free, that's his dream of codification.
But then there's the dark side.
Then there's the Panopticon. We live in a world where data is the new currency. We are constantly observed. CCTV cameras on every street, cookies tracking our every click, our phones monitoring our location.
And we accept it. That's the most amazing thing. We willingly accept the terms of service. Why? Because it gives us utility. I let Google track my location because I want the pleasure of Google Maps working perfectly to get me to a restaurant.
Exactly. We have willingly traded our privacy for convenience and pleasure. We have accepted the sentiment of invisible omniscience because the algorithm optimizes our happiness. It shows us ads for things we want to buy. It recommends music we'll like.
It's the ultimate trade-off between freedom and optimization. Bentham didn't really care about freedom for its own sake. He saw it as a tool for happiness. He wanted us to be happy, safe, and productive. And if being watched helps achieve that, he'd say, watch away.
And that, I think, is the final provocative thought to leave with. Bentham dreamed of a world run by a benevolent calculator of human happiness. So if an algorithm, a superintelligent AI, could calculate exactly how to run your life to maximize your personal happiness, but in exchange, you had to give up your free will and just follow its instructions, would you do it?
That is the ultimate utilitarian question.
Yeah.
And looking at how glued we all are to our phones and our recommendation feeds, I think for a lot of people the answer is already yes.
I think you might be right.
On that cheery note, next time you're in London, go say hello to Jeremy. Just don't tap on the glass. He's watching.
Always watching.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.